Successful people come in all ages, shapes, sizes, and colors, but they all have one thing in common: a winning attitude. The attitude we habitually present to the world can be controlled by you and me. We determine our attitude when we get up in the morning and set out on a new day. And our days, all the years of our lives, will usually reflect and give us back what we really expect. We live in a world of words. No matter what something happens to be, we have a word for it. And some words mean a great deal to us. Words such as love, happiness, success, achievement, joy, ability. These words describe conditions all of us want. But there's one word that controls them all. That is, there's one word that describes a condition that will bring us all of these things or keep us from getting any one of them. It's been called the most important word on earth. If your youngster asks you what this word is, could you tell him? And if from all the many thousands of words in the language you were asked to select the one that would influence your life more than any other, could you pick the right word? I call it the magic word, and I've talked about it before. In our language, it's pronounced attitude. Once we're grown and on our own, this word actually controls our environment, our entire world. You see, if your attitude toward the world is good, you'll obtain good results. If your attitude is excellent, you'll obtain excellent results. And if your attitude is just so-so, well, you'll live in a world that is not particularly bad nor particularly good, just so-so. Now, if you're curious about what kind of an attitude you have, a simple test will tell you what your attitude's been up to this point in your life. Just answer this question with a yes or no. Do you feel the world is treating you well? If your answer is a quick yes, your attitude is good. If your answer is no, your attitude is bad. And if you have trouble deciding, your attitude is probably average. You see, our environment, which is another way of saying how the world treats us, is nothing more than a reflection, a merciless mirror, actually, of our own attitude. One of the most pitiful aspects of society is the really large percentage of people who lead dismal, narrow, darkened lives, crying out against what appears to be a cruel world that they believe has singled them out for an existence of trouble, misery, and bad luck. Our attitude will determine whether we tend to be lucky or not. People who expect to be lucky, who expect good things to happen to them more often than bad, actually go through life from one piece of good fortune to another. I know there are cynics who don't believe all of this, but it's true all the same, and it's been proved hundreds of thousands of times. It doesn't mean you can pick the winner at the track or bet on the right team. There are too many variables in such things. But we get from life what we tend to expect from it. We do the things we make up our minds to do, live in the towns or areas we want to live in, and work at the jobs of our choice once we learn the magic of putting our minds and attitudes to work in our lives. The person with the attitude that he can't do something will seldom do it. The person who believes he can does. Perhaps not the first time, but his attitude gives him the confidence to stay with it until it's been accomplished. When I was starting out to build my business, I used to call on advertising agencies in Chicago. I met a lot of receptionists and telephone operators. I'd give my greeting and ask how they felt, and I recall hearing on several occasions, in fact most of the time, the response, "I'm tired." I'd say, "Well, it's only 10 o'clock in the morning. How can you be tired already? No sleep last night?" "No," the receptionist would say, "I got plenty of sleep. I'm just tired in the mornings." These people had tired attitudes. They expected to be tired, but if they were leaving on vacation that morning or a special weekend were coming up, chances are they'd get up feeling great. Nearly every time I've started something of some size and risk, I've had people tell me not to try. "You'll just lose your shirt," they'd say. They had losing attitudes. I never gave it a thought, and you'll find that typical of people who get things done. They may proceed with great caution and care and go to great lengths to avoid making any unnecessary mistakes. But they fully intend to win, and when they do, with an attitude of failure, we're whipped before we start. Successful people come in all ages, shapes, sizes, and colors. But they all have one thing in common: a winning attitude. I ran across a quotation by Norman Cousins I thought you'd find interesting. He said, "The prime fallacy of pessimism is that no one knows enough to be a pessimist." I'm sure a pessimist would counter with the remark that if that's true, no one knows enough to be an optimist, but this would not change the truth of the former thought. The prime fallacy of pessimism is that no one knows enough to be a pessimist, and regardless of whether this is also true of the optimist, we do know that over the long haul, we tend to get what we expect from life. Because we tend to get what we really expect from life, it makes a lot of sense to choose to be optimistic rather than pessimistic. How many times have you heard someone say, or perhaps have said yourself, "With my kind of luck, such and such is bound to happen," indicating that your luck is generally bad and that you expect the worst. Even when people find themselves enjoying a sudden stroke of good fortune, they'll often say, "Well, it's too good to last," again indicating that they expect their fortunes in life to be generally bad. Now, this must be a hangover from times going back to the Dark Ages, and perhaps before, when life was 1,000 times more precarious than it is today. As recently as 100 years ago, if you cut your toe and blood poisoning, as it was called, set in, you could be a goner. The mortality rate for children was astronomical, and almost as high for adults. If a person reached his 30th birthday, it called for a real celebration. In fact, birthday celebrations for any age took on importance simply because getting from one to another was no little achievement. Now couple this with the almost total ignorance of the times, widespread illiteracy, and lives governed by superstition, and you can understand why people tended to be slightly on the pessimistic side, but that's in the past. And even then, it was the optimists who were responsible for what little forward movement occurred. Pessimists aren't builders. They're more often stumbling blocks. Instead of looking for the reasons something can be done or tried, they tend to look for reasons why it won't work. A pessimist is a real reactionary. He tends to go backward. He resists anything new and untried. He's the person who says the bottle is half empty instead of half full, or that the weather is partly cloudy instead of partly sunny. He dwells on his past failures and forgets his successes. He'll come up with 100 reasons for not doing something instead of a single good reason for doing it. He likes to say no to people, and as a result, says no to life. And getting back to that quote of Norman Cousins, perhaps the biggest fault of a pessimist is that he thinks he knows more than he does. He doesn't know about the power of enthusiasm and a good attitude. He won't move forward until all the lights ahead turn green, and thus never moves, because all the lights are never green at any one time. A person has to learn to be a pessimist. Children are the most wonderful optimists and think anything at all is possible. It must be in the home that so much of this natural enthusiasm dies or is killed. As George Santana said, we must welcome the future, remembering that soon it will be the past. And we must respect the past, remembering that once it was all that was humanly possible. Let me quote something to you found in Carl Sandburg's account of the Kansas sodbuster. Who was that early sodbuster in Kansas? He leaned at the gatepost and studied the horizon and figured what corn might do next year and tried to calculate why God ever made the grasshopper and why 2 days of hot winds smothered the life out of a stand of wheat and why there was such a spread between what he got for grain and the price quoted in Chicago and New York. Drove up a newcomer in a covered wagon. What kind of folks live around here? Well, stranger, what kind of folks was there in the country you come from? Well, there was mostly a low-down, lying, thieving, gossiping, backbiting lot of people. Well, I guess, stranger, that's about the kind of folks you'll find around here. And the dusty gray stranger had just about blended into the dusty gray cottonwoods in a clump on the horizon when another newcomer drove up. What kind of folks live around here? Well, stranger, what kind of folks was there in the country you came from? Well, there was mostly a decent, hard-working, law-abiding, friendly lot of people. Well, I guess, stranger, that's about the kind of folks you'll find around here. And the second wagon moved off and blended with the dusty gray cottonwoods on the horizon while the early sodbuster leaned at his gatepost and tried to figure out why 2 days of hot winds smother the life out of a nice stand of wheat. Noel McGinnis tells us that what Carl Sandburg is telling us here is that the world cooperates with us by conforming to our expectations of it. The classic example of this is, of course, the paranoid who suspects that everyone's against him and who therefore relates to people in such a way that they're bound to be against him. Psychologists have demonstrated that our idea of reality is determined by our perception of things, the way our senses interpret things, rather than the way things really are. Edward T. Hall has written that the relationship between man and the cultural dimension is one in which both man and his environment participate in molding each other. Man is now in the position of actually creating the total world in which he lives. In creating this world, he is actually determining what kind of an organism he'll be. Carl Sandburg, Dorothy Lee, Benjamin Lee Whorf, Edward Hall, and numerous others have told us, in essence, that we create our own space. Now, what does this mean? Well, as with Albert Einstein, it means that space is relative. Unlike Newtonian physicists, Einstein did not conceive of space as an absolute entity in relation to which things are organized. Quite the contrary, he defined space as the relationship that exists among things as a result of their organization. Well, the tendency for reality to be a self-fulfilling prophecy rather than an absolute given has been explained by some modern anthropologists. Dorothy Lee does a good job of it in Freedom and Culture. And what all this means for you and me is that our individual worlds will respond to us in the way in which we see them. They will become for us what we expect of them. We are the creators of our own surroundings. The saddest days of our lives are those days in which we can find nothing to be enthusiastic about. I think you can say that a person's enthusiasm is in direct proportion to the importance of what it is he's looking forward to. Thus, there are all sorts of degrees of enthusiasm. People tend to be mildly enthusiastic on Fridays simply because it's the last day of the week and they've got a free weekend coming up. People tend to be more enthusiastic about going home after work at night than they are about leaving for work in the morning. But the most fortunate people on earth are those who live most of their lives in a state of energizing enthusiasm. And you know what the key to enthusiasm is? Well, there are two keys, really. One comes from learning, the other comes from accomplishment. Learning new things tends to keep our enthusiasm high. Perhaps this explains the natural enthusiasm of children. If you've paid much attention to children, you've noticed that they're naturally enthusiastic and they're naturally happy. The reason adults tend to lose a lot of their enthusiasm for living is that they usually stop learning. As soon as school's over, they take the stand, consciously or unconsciously, that they know enough. Any learning they do from that point on, they do passively through the natural passage of time and experience, or again, passively through the media of newspapers, radio, and television. If new learning comes to them, it does so largely through no efforts, or at least minimal efforts on their part. Learning little that is new or interesting, their lives become repetitious and settle down into well-worn grooves. They see the same people and go through the same motions every day, and gradually or quickly, all or most of the enthusiasm fades from their lives. The second key usually ties in with the first, the second key being accomplishment. It's pretty hard to accomplish something new without first learning something new, even if the accomplishment is limited to improving one's golf game or making furniture in the basement. But we're enthusiastic when we're working on a project we want to complete or master. The key word there is want. It has to be something we want very much to do, as opposed to those duties and projects we must do whether we like them or not. Did you ever get a good look at a dog's face when he's chasing a rabbit? It's the happiest, most alert expression you'll ever see in your life. He's got something wonderfully worthwhile to do, and he's having the time of his life trying to do it. You'd hardly know it was the same dog you saw snoozing and twitching on the back porch before the rabbit came into the picture. He couldn't even keep his eyes open then. It's the same with people. The rabbit may be different for each of us, but it's our job to flesh it out. The word enthusiasm comes from the Greek word entheos, which means the God within. And the happiest, most interesting people are those who have found the secret of maintaining their enthusiasm, that God within. I'd like to read something to you that was written back in the year 1917. It was written by Bruce Barton, who lived to head one of the world's largest advertising agencies and who also won a seat in the United States House of Representatives. The fact that this story was written in 1917 is not important. It's as true today as it was then. Bruce Barton wrote, "A little while ago, I was in charge of a large organization of salesmen. My chief sent me to a Midwestern city to appoint a manager for that territory. There were two candidates. We had their records in detail, but we had never met either of them. I was to look them over, form my judgment, and appoint the better man. I met one in Cincinnati, the other in St. Louis. The man in Cincinnati said to me, 'What does this position pay?' I told him. 'That's more than I'm getting here,' he said, 'and I should like the job. Every man wants to better himself when he can.' The St. Louis man did not wait for me to arrive in the city. He found out what train I was coming on, rode out on the line, and surprised me by walking down the aisle of my car. He began to talk. He told me about himself, his training, and his selling experience. He'd drawn up plans in detail for the development of our territory. He told me how many men he expected to have working by the end of the year, and just how he thought he could increase our volume of business. I had to hire him finally in order to get a chance to go to bed that night, and in his enthusiasm he forgot to ask me, and I forgot to tell him what the salary would be. The first man had wanted a better job, which is commendable enough, but I hired the man who was enthusiastic about the opportunity. Napoleon's adversaries used to speak of him as the 100,000 man, meaning that his spirit infused into an army was equal to an additional 100,000 troops. They criticized his tactics. They accused him of disregarding all the rules of successful warfare, yet he won, and they lost, because his enthusiasm carried his soldiers to impossible achievements. Encourage your children to express their enthusiasm and delight. Let them believe that the world is full of wonderful things and they themselves full of splendid possibilities. They can learn self-repression in later years, but enthusiasm once lost is lost forever. Men are nothing, said Montaigne, until they're excited, and Montaigne was right. Well, that's the story that Bruce Barton wrote in 1917, but you could haul it out 100 years from now and its lesson would be just as valuable. We should never lose our zest for living, our excitement and enthusiasm, our curiosity and our desire to know. The person who does is certainly blind to the world, its miracles and possibilities, and his own possibilities. And when we put a damper on a child's enthusiasm, we're repressing one of his most valuable emotions. You know, the world is as exciting today as it was when we were children. The trouble lies in the fact that we tend to lose our children's eyes, and because of it, our enthusiasm for life. How would you answer the question, why are you here? Go ahead, ask the question. Ask, why am I here? Do you know? Dr. Albert Einstein was asked to answer that question, and he did. Do you know what he said? Well, I'll get to it in a moment. You know, it's been said that if the universe is an accident, we are accidents. But if there's meaning in the universe, then there's meaning in us also. And since it is believed that Dr. Einstein understood more about the laws governing the universe than any person who ever lived up until his time, let's go to him for some answers. He believed there was some sort of meaning in the way things are. He was sure of it. He said, the more I study physics, the more I'm drawn toward metaphysics. The word metaphysics simply means beyond physics, the study of what is beyond measure, the invisible forces at work. Getting back to Einstein, if you haven't done so, you would enjoy reading Einstein, The Life and Times by Ronald W. Clark. Albert Einstein was so remarkable a man that it was as if he had arrived on this planet through some mistake in celestial navigation, and as a result devoted his life to solving the problems of time and space so that the mistake would not be repeated. Dr. Einstein belonged to no formal religion or sect. Yet he was a deeply religious man in the cosmic sense. He believed that such magnificence and colossal order, the great cyclotron of the universe, as Ronald Clark puts it, could not have been an accident. And he addressed himself to the purpose of life. He answered the question, why am I here? As well as it has been answered, I believe, when he said, man is here for the sake of other men only. Now, he used the word man in its classical sense, the idiomatic man, meaning human beings of both sexes, of course. So he said that we are here for the sake of others only. Is that the way you would have answered it? Do you believe that you are here solely to serve others, and through serving others, are being served and enjoying life as a result? We are here for the sake of serving others only. And to the extent that we serve others will we know the joy of living. To many that'll sound silly and square, but that's what it comes down to nevertheless, and sometimes it takes a long time to learn the truth of it. Millions never learn it, and grow old in querulous discontent wondering what went wrong with their lives. Our rewards in life will always be in direct proportion to our contribution. This is the law that stands as the supporting structure of all economics and of our personal well-being. Unfortunately, most people either don't know about this wonderful rule or think that somehow it applies only to the other guy. Most people believe we should have speed limit signs too, but that they're for other people who don't know how to drive as well as they do. Let's get back to the law of rewards equaling contributions. The law's in operation all the time, whether or not we know about it or go along with it. It's like an apothecary scale, you know the kind with a cross-arm on top from which depend two bowls on chains. A delicate and honest mechanism. Let's label one of the bowls rewards, and the other one contributions. Most people concentrate on the bowl marked rewards. That is, they want things, more money, a better home, education for the kids, travel, retirement, so on, all rewards. They're hungering for the rewards. But the rewards aren't materializing because they're forgetting the bowl marked contributions. In other words, they're concentrating on the wrong bowl. They're like the man who sat in front of the stove and said, "Give me heat, and then I'll give you wood." He could sit there until he froze to death. Stoves don't work that way, and neither does life or economics. We can actually forget about the bowl marked rewards. All we have to do is concentrate on the bowl marked contributions. Life and basic economics will automatically take care of the rewards. It's a fact that most people have this backward. Now, what do we mean by contribution, and to whom do we contribute? You can define contribution as the time you devote to whatever it is you do and the degree of excellence you put into it. And your contribution is to mankind, and mankind can be defined as the people you serve. So you can break it all down to a simple equation. Your rewards will be determined by the way you do your job, multiplied by the number of people you serve. In our exploding economy today, if a person isn't happy with his rewards, he should take a good long look at his contributions. This may seem like a hard, cruel way of looking at things, but laws are good or bad only in the way we look at them. If you feel you're being held back in life, or that you're not getting enough of the things you should, to paraphrase the late John F. Kennedy, ask not what you can get, but what you can do, what you can contribute to the causes and people it is given you to serve. Your rewards, believe me, will always take care of themselves. Here are a few thoughts that you can make your own. Thoughts, if you do make them your own, that will guarantee your success all the years of your life. Now, that's quite a statement, but it's true. Now, to begin, let's understand that growth and increase are a part of mankind and all of nature. It's inherent in each of us to desire more. This isn't wrong. It's perfectly natural in the way it should be. This is true of all of us, the members of our families, our friends and associates, our customers. You should want to get rich in every department of your life. But what do I mean by rich? Getting rich for you is getting what you want very much. For some, it means a bigger income or a large sum of capital. That's fine. You can get it without hurting or even competing with any other person. In fact, you can thereby increase the general well-being of everyone with whom you come in contact. Unfortunately, the uninformed believe that you can get ahead in the world only at the expense of someone else. This isn't true. No one can become rich in any way without serving others. Anyone who adds to prosperity must prosper in turn. Getting rich for you may mean obtaining more love, greater peace of mind, owning the home of your dreams, or accomplishing something else you've set your heart upon. In short, getting rich is getting whatever it is you want very much. It's as simple as that. Now, the first step is to understand completely that it's right for you to want what you want. All human activities are based on the desire for increase. People seeking more food, more clothes, more knowledge, more pleasure, more life. The next step is to understand that you need not compete with or deprive anyone. Don't compete. Create. In this way, you add to the general well-being without taking anything away from anyone. Remember to give to every person more than you take from him. Now, at first, this may sound absurd, so let's dig into it a little. In order for a business or a person to expand, and remember expansion is the natural desire of mankind, we must give more in use value than we charge. A building nail doesn't cost much, yet its use is great and goes on for years. This cassette didn't cost much, yet if you can get ideas from it that can bring you more than you now have, its use value will greatly exceed its cost. How much does it cost to give love, respect, and consideration to those near you? Very little, just a little extra effort. Yet love, respect, and consideration are priceless to the person receiving them. This is the key. Give more than you receive in everything you do. In this way, you're building a great credit for yourself that must come to you in some form, sooner or later. You are taking out less than you're putting in, and by so doing, you're building a tidal wave of future prosperity. This is the law of increase. It's understood and followed undeviatingly by every successful business person, artist, professional, and worker, by every successful mother and father and friend. It's the most striking attribute of all successful people, companies, and institutions. Now let's go back to the idea of creating instead of competing. You're the point from which all increase must stem. Not your company, your spouse, your parents, or your friends. You're the creative center of your universe. Increase must come from you personally. Find ways to do the things you do that reflect you and your own unique talents and abilities. If you do this, no other person in the world can operate exactly as you do. You will not be competing with anyone. You'll be creating from within yourself. As you find new and better ways of giving more in use value than you're receiving in money, more and more people will turn to you. You'll find your circle of friends increasing. If you're in business, you'll find it continually growing, expanding. Do this in a quiet and unobtrusive manner. You don't have to shout about how much you're doing for others. They'll recognize it and be drawn to you. One of the most interesting things about such increase is that totally unexpected and wonderful things will begin to occur in your life. People you don't know of exactly what you need will make their appearance at the right time and in the right place. Everything will begin to dovetail, and your life will take on new meaning and direction and bring you far greater rewards. Let the impression of growth, of increase, mark everything you do. As you do these things, keep constantly before you the vision of what it is you intend to accomplish. Don't worry about it. Don't fret about it. Just know you're going to accomplish it. And following these rules, you can't fail. Dr. Albert Schweitzer once said, "I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I do know. The only ones among you who will be really happy are those who have sought and found how to serve." People who have not found a meaningful way to serve tend to be at odds with themselves and their worlds. The so-called empty nest years of millions of middle-aged women with a great deal of talent and ability, with a great deal to give, and no place to put it. They putter around the empty house doing simple automatic chores while literally aching for something more meaningful to do, a way of serving that will bring them the contentment and fulfillment and happiness they yearn for. We feel nervous and depressed when we're not being of service. It's what gives meaning to our leisure and gives us a feeling of being needed and important. Every person should ask himself, how can I best marshal my human resources and apply them to a field in which I have interest in a way which will maximize my service? If I can do that, everything else is very likely to fall into place. Millions who find their lives boring, who find themselves depressed, at odds with themselves and others, who find themselves suffering from a restless discontent, called the malaise of our times, should seek ways of being of service. I read recently about a psychological test in which you're supposed to complete 20 statements beginning with the words, "I am." That is, on a sheet of paper, you write down the number 1, and behind it write, "I am," and then complete the sentence. You might begin by writing, "I am a human creature." Then on line 2, you again begin the statement with "I am," and make a statement about yourself. You do that 20 times, and before you reach 20, you're making some pretty revealing comments. You're digging for information about yourself. In fact, you're doing what Socrates suggested we do when he said that an unexamined life is not worth living, or words to that effect. And with this method, if in case you're looking for some way of serving, in case you do not now have a very interesting and viable method of service, with this method you might find a clue as to the field or way in which you can make the greatest possible contribution. For by so doing, you're going to reap the greatest possible rewards. I don't think there's any question but that Dr. Schweitzer was correct in his statement. Serving each other is the way to happiness and fulfillment. If you took away the people that we serve, our lives would become meaningless. Other people have everything in the world we can possibly want, and they will gladly share it with us if we will serve them to their satisfaction. The real purpose of our journey through life is to find out how best we can serve. Have you ever noticed that when someone calls you on the phone, you immediately form a mental picture of the person? You get not only a mental picture of his face and figure, or hers, but a feeling with regard to his or her personality. And that feeling you get is either good or bad. That is, the person affects you either pleasantly or unpleasantly. There's hardly ever a perfectly neutral feeling. It's either favorable or unfavorable. And to carry it a step further, You project a picture in the minds of the people with whom you come in contact, and again, whether it's on the phone or in person, that picture is either favorable or unfavorable. You're projecting these pictures all day long to your children, your marriage partner, the people who serve you, your associates, your boss, everyone, all day, every day. So how's your picture? How do you appear to people passing by on the street? Do you appear happy, unhappy, bored, disinterested, worried, successful, or unsuccessful? The picture you project, the way in which you communicate to every person you come in contact with during the day, is a reflection of your total personality. The picture you project is determined by how you feel inside. The people who project the best pictures are those who know how to be grateful. Their gratitude for what they have, for what they are, kind of radiates about them. They don't worry about what's missing, but are grateful for what's there. They don't concentrate on the shortcomings of their marriage partner or their children. They're grateful just to have them. They look upon problems as things to be solved, and are grateful for the capacity and wisdom to overcome them. These are the people who run deep. More than any other factor, gratitude projects the kind of picture that is irresistible. It attracts men, women, dogs, and cats. It also attracts a condition mistakenly called good luck. These people are easy to recognize. There's a calm, sort of level look to their eyes, and smiling comes as naturally to them as breathing. They don't complain about what's to be done. They simply do it, and do it well, and then start looking around for something else to do. They radiate ability and good cheer like an old-fashioned stove radiates heat on a cold morning. They project a great picture, and the world projects it back to them. Every minute of every waking hour of every day of your life, you're projecting a picture of yourself and your personality, and you can tell how it looks to the world by looking at what you're getting back. One of the truly great things that accrued to the old-time craftsman, and to the few still remaining, was the joy that came from the meaning of doing. The feeling of value that pervades a person's whole being when he does something of which he's proud. The woman who knits or does needlepoint, the painter, the writer, the cabinet maker, the really good cook, the workman or woman who creates something of value. And I think that's it, the personal creation of value. You know what I mean? If you do, you know that it's a large part of a person's income, his psychic income, so important to living and good, healthy adjustment. The distinguished social critic Lewis Mumford has written that the fact is that with all of our superabundance, abundance of energy, food, materials, products, there's been no commensurate improvement in the quality of our daily existence. He said the great mass of comfortable, well-fed people in our civilization live lives of emotional apathy and mental torpor, of dull passivity and enfeebled desire, lives that belie the real potentialities of modern culture. He's also pointed out that the fault lies in forcing something that is capable of producing goods in great numbers to produce more and more, more on top of more, more every month, every year, until quality and beauty must be destroyed in the process, until there's so much that we no longer appreciate it. Mumford's concerned, and I think every thinking person will agree with his concern. He's concerned with balance and self-discipline, with the sort of person who will do intelligently and well whatever he turns his hand to, because he understands the meaning of doing, the meaning of value, not only in that to which he turns his hand, but in his life as well. There's meaning in doing something well, anything really. You know, there are no so-called good jobs and bad jobs. Every job holds within it the road to greatness if it's done well, if it can give us the meaning and satisfaction that come from doing a job as well as we can learn to do it. It's wonderful these days when we find a person who does an unusually good job, a waitress, a service station attendant, a mechanic, a salesperson, a carpenter, plumber, other craftsman, an attorney, doctor, whomever. We run into them from time to time, and we never fail to notice and be aware of them, to be grateful to them. Such people always seem happier, more cheerful, and have a much better self-image. They seem to find joy and delight in their work, in their days. They seem to understand that there is meaning in doing what they do as well as they can. They take a few extra pains that converts what would otherwise be an ordinary job into something special. They stand out like fresh oases in a dismal desert of uninteresting sameness, and they find that the meaning they find in doing brings meaning into their lives. They're happier people because of it. You know them. Perhaps you're one of them. If so, congratulations. You're the member of an exclusive club. James B. Conant, when he was president of Harvard University, commented that each honest calling, each walk of life, has its own elite, its own aristocracy based upon excellence of performance. That's beautiful. People in every field of human endeavor will agree with that remark. Aristotle said, "Excellence is an art won by training and habituation. We do not act rightly because we have virtue or excellence, but we rather have those because we've acted rightly. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit." By judging the excellence or the lack of it of our work, we can tell if we're in the right calling. If it's of paramount importance to us to strive for excellence in what we do, chances are we're in the kind of work for which we're best fitted, or at least one of the fields for which we're qualified. One of the problems of the business person is that after developing and profiting from a good idea, he will tend to stay with it in unchanging form too long. For some things that'll work, but for most things it won't. They need updating on a regular, annual basis. We need to ask ourselves at regular intervals, a number of times each year, how can we make it better, more efficient? How can we bring it up to the best of present, even future standards? People will cling to an idea as though it's the best, if not the only idea they'll ever get. And when we're creating or building something, are we anticipating the future? A good example of foresight is found in the main streets of towns and cities built by the Mormons when they moved west. They were riding horses and driving wagons then, but they built broad, beautiful streets that easily accommodate the heavy automobile traffic of today. We tend to cling too long to past successes, systems, and methods. If it's working well today, look at it with the future in mind. We're seeing an accelerating rate of change unprecedented in history, and because so many businesses are still living in the past, there are yawning opportunities on practically every side. How many businesses in your town haven't made a single change in 20 years? In some cases, that may work. For example, a fine old restaurant that's perhaps better now than ever because of its age and strict adherence to quality. But the business people of a community owe it to their customers and the community to keep abreast of excellence, to put part of their profits back into the business to accommodate changing times and tastes. As James B. Conant said, each honest calling, each walk of life, has its own elite, its own aristocracy, based upon excellence of performance, and that applies to every field of human endeavor. We can develop habits of excellence in everything we do. We need to think in terms of excellence. We should demand it in what we buy and produce it in what we do. There's an old adage in the publishing and printing industry that goes something like this: the quality of your proofreading will be appreciated long after your speed has been forgotten. And the same principle applies to practically everything we do in life. Once we've finished a piece of work, whether it's a book, a symphony, a manufactured product, or even a sales presentation or a speech, the only thing that really counts is the quality and integrity of the completed product. Very few people who see, hear, or experience the finished work will know or even care how rapidly it was put together. The things we treasure in life are most often those things that were not produced in a hurry, and we can see a return to the old ways of quality first and speed second in many of the better products being marketed today. In this era of increasing pressures and tensions, it often seems that we tend to put an unjustified premium on how quickly a given job can be accomplished. And it's a good idea to pause once in a while to remind ourselves that in the final analysis, it's the quality of our work that's most important, not how fast we were able to turn it out. Some of the better furniture houses will keep you waiting months, maybe a year, for the furniture you order. They don't like to keep you waiting, but they won't compromise with quality, so if you want that particular item, you wait. There's a tremendous opportunity in virtually every field for the person of dedication who has the willingness to work, to succeed by turning out a truly quality product. There's a man of my acquaintance who earns all the extra money he can use by working as a handyman. He has back orders stacked a foot high. He charges a good rate for his work, but his work is really first rate. It's excellent. No matter what you might need done around the house, painting or repairing of any kind, he can do it, and do it beautifully. As a result, he decides on his own income. He can live where he pleases and work where he pleases. He's got it made. There's nothing in the world that I can think of that cannot be made better, that cannot be improved on. When you find a way to improve on whatever it is, there'll be people waiting to buy it. Quality in a person or a product or a service is sought by everyone. You have only to think of what you'd most enjoy doing and find a way to do it better, to put in more quality, and you just might have everything else you want to. A friend of mine passed along to me an old out-of-print book entitled The Magic of a Name. It's about the beginnings of the Rolls-Royce automobile, written by Earl Nightingale and first published in 1938. It makes interesting reading. But the point that underlies the story is the fact that the originator of the Rolls-Royce automobile, Henry Royce, was an indefatigable perfectionist. He didn't invent the automobile, he just wasn't happy with it. He thought it was too noisy for one thing and too heavy and inefficient. And so it happened that in Manchester, England, on April 1st, 1904, there came into being a motor car unlike any other that had been seen or heard before. As Earl Nightingale put it, save for a gentle foot from its exhaust pipe, it made no noise at all. There was no clatter from the engine, no grinding from the gears and back axle. And this comparative silence in the days when the noise of a motor car had been likened with deadly accuracy to an avalanche of tea trays was something to marvel at indeed. At the wheel of this miraculous machine sat a bearded figure of some 40 years of age, whose piercing eyes were lit with a gleam of triumphant concentration. It was Henry Royce, later Sir Henry, the perfectionist. The trade name Rolls-Royce went on to become synonymous with anything excellent or outstanding. The Spitfires of the Battle of Britain in 1940, which had Rolls-Royce engines, were a big factor in winning that war. In fact, there's a beautiful stained-glass memorial window at the Rolls-Royce aircraft engine plant commemorating the pilots of the Royal Air Force, and it reads, "Who in the Battle of Britain turned the work of our hands into the salvation of our country." But the point I want to make is that to become successful and outstanding at something, we don't have to come up with something new. We need only find ways of doing it better. If you think about it, it's the key element in virtually all success stories. Hilton hotels, Holiday Inns, Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's hamburgers. The list is endless. If you want to succeed at something, just do it better. Henry Royce was so wrapped up in the business of producing a superior automobile, he would forget to eat for days at a time and sleep on a bench in the foundry. A boy was hired to follow him around with a glass of milk and some bread so he wouldn't get sick from malnutrition. He once heard a mechanic make the statement, "Okay, that's good enough," and they almost had to tie him down. Nothing was good enough for him, and his name and the name of his salesman-distributor partner, C.S. Rolls, is a symbol of quality. It's the same in every field. Advertising to zinnia growing. Give it the kind of study and all-out dedication that Royce gave to his cars, and your name will someday stand like some of those I mentioned earlier.